They touched Earth's children. The universe paid the price. The stars had never seemed so bright as they did from the observation deck of the Aldrin Academy on Elysium 4. And young Maya Chen pressed her small hands against the glass as she watched cargo ships drift across the purple sky above her colony world. She was only 8 years old, but she already knew she wanted to be a starship captain when she grew up, just like her grandmother, Admiral Helena Chun, who commanded the mighty vessels of Earth's 7th Fleet. Elysium 4 was paradise in every sense of the word, with its rolling green hills and crystal blue oceans and air so clean it tasted sweet on the tongue. Humanity had searched for centuries to find such a perfect world, and now 50,000 colonists called it home. The jewel of this jewel was the Aldrin Academy, a sprawling campus of silver buildings where 4,000 children lived and learned and dreamed of futures among the stars. They came from all 17 of humanity's colony worlds, brought together to receive the finest education the species could offer. Maya turned from the window when her teacher called the class back to their seats, and she ran to join her friends with a smile that could light up any room. She had no way of knowing that in orbit above her head, something terrible was about to begin. The Valdrix Consortium had watched humanity spread across the galaxy for 300 years, and with each new colony the elder races grew more furious. They were ancient beings who had ruled these stars for millennia, and they did not appreciate these young upstarts claiming worlds that belonged to no one. Ambassador Cathver of the Valdrix was a creature of scales and pride, standing 9 feet tall with eyes like burning coals. He had lived for 600 years and had seen younger species rise and fall like waves upon a shore, and he believed humans would be no different. They breed like insects, he hissed to his council as they gathered in their great hall among the stars, and they spread like disease across our galaxy. It is time we reminded them of their place. The council murmured their agreement, for they had grown tired of human expansion and human ambition and human refusal to bow before their betters. Cathver sent his ultimatum to Earth on a cold morning in March. Surrender all colony worlds immediately, accept permanent restrictions on human travel and technology, or face the consequences of defiance. On Earth, President Amara Osei read the message with steady hands and a heart full of fire. She was a woman who had risen from poverty to lead all of humanity, and she had not achieved this by surrendering to bullies. "We will not abandon our people," she declared to the Unified Council as they debated their response, "and we will not bow to threats from those who see us as lesser beings. We are humanity, and we bend our knees to no one." Admiral James Chun, the oldest and most respected military commander in human space, stood before the council with 60 years of experience weighing on his shoulders. His granddaughter Maya lived on Elysium 4, and he thought of her bright smile as he spoke. "We should prepare for the worst," he warned them, "because the Valdrix do not make empty threats, and they have more ships than we do. But we will meet whatever comes with courage and with strength." The council voted unanimously to reject the ultimatum and to seek peaceful resolution through diplomatic channels. They were not warmongers, and they believed that reasonable beings could find reasonable solutions. But Cathver was not a reasonable being, and when he received humanity's response, his scales flushed dark with rage. He had expected fear and submission, not proud defiance from creatures he considered barely more than animals. They wished to learn the hard way. He snarled to his military commanders, "So we shall teach them a lesson they will never forget. But we will not waste our fleets on their pitiful defenses." His plan was elegant in its cruelty. Bypass all military targets, ignore all defensive positions, and strike at something humans valued far more than ships or stations. The Valdrix strike force dropped out of hyperspace above Elysium 4 on a beautiful spring morning, and Maya Chun was eating breakfast with her friends when the alarms began to scream. Teachers rushed to gather their students, But there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide as Valdric's soldiers descended from the sky in waves of armored shuttles. They moved through the academy with terrible efficiency, stunning anyone who resisted and herding the children into containment fields. Maya screamed for her grandmother as rough hands grabbed her, but Admiral Helena Chun was 1,000 light years away and could not hear her cry. The little girl who dreamed of starships found herself trapped in a cage of light, surrounded by weeping children and the cold laughter of their captors. Cathver himself came to inspect his prizes, walking among the rows of imprisoned children with satisfaction gleaming in his cold, dark eyes. Such small creatures, he mused as he looked down at their terrified faces, and yet their parents will do anything to have them back. Humanity will learn to obey, or they will never see their precious children again. The transmission that reached Earth showed everything. 4,000 children crying in containment fields, loaded onto Valdric ships like cargo, while Kethver delivered his new demands with a smile that showed too many teeth. "You have 30 days to surrender unconditionally," he announced to the watching billions, "or these little ones will learn what happens to those who defy the Valdric's consortium. Choose wisely, humans." Admiral James Chun watched the transmission in the command center of Earth's orbital defense platform, and he saw his granddaughter Maya among the crying children. Something ancient and terrible woke in his heart as he stared at her frightened face. His aide approached him carefully, seeing something in the old admiral's eyes that she had never witnessed before. It was not grief, and it was not fear. It was something far more dangerous. "Sir," she asked quietly, "what are your orders?" James Chun turned away from the screen, and when he spoke, his voice was calm and cold as the void between stars. "Wake the wolves," he commanded, and those 3 words would echo through history forever, and tell them their hunt has finally begun. Across human space, encrypted channels activated and hidden bases came alive, and warriors, who had trained their entire lives for this moment, received the call they had always known would come. The Valdrics had made the worst mistake any species could make. They had touched Earth's children, and now the universe would pay the price for their arrogance. In her containment field aboard a Valdric's warship, little Maya Chun clutched her knees to her chest and whispered a prayer to anyone who might be listening. "Please," she breathed into the darkness, "please let grandmother find me." She did not know it yet, but her grandmother was already coming, and she was bringing all of humanity with her. They touched Earth's children. The universe paid the price deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Hidden among billions of tumbling rocks, there existed a station that appeared on no map and no record. Fenrir Station was humanity's darkest secret, and inside it waited the deadliest warriors the species had ever produced. Commander Sasha Volkov was 43 years old and had spent 20 of those years preparing for a day she hoped would never come. She was tall and lean with silver-streaked hair and eyes the color of a winter storm, and she commanded the unit known only as the Wolves. When the encrypted signal reached her personal terminal, she read the 3 words that changed everything. "Wake the wolves." Sasha stood slowly from her desk and walked to the observation window that looked out upon her secret domain. 200 of the finest soldiers humanity had ever trained slept and ate and prepared within these hidden halls, and now their moment had arrived. "All units report to Briefing Room Alpha," she announced over the station's internal system. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Within minutes, 200 warriors assembled before her with faces carved from stone and hearts burning with purpose. They wore no uniforms and carried no standard weapons, for they were equipped with technology so advanced it had been classified beyond top secret. Neural combat enhancement allowed them to think and react 3 times faster than normal humans, while antimatter micro-warheads gave them firepower that could crack a moon. Their Spectre-class stealth ships were invisible to every sensor array the galaxy had ever produced. You have all seen the transmission, Sasha told her assembled wolves as images of crying children played on the screen behind her. The Valdrics have taken 4,000 of our children, and they believe this gives them power over us. A low growl rippled through the gathered warriors, for many of them had children of their own back on Earth. They are wrong, Sasha continued with ice in her voice, and we're going to teach them exactly how wrong they are. Prepare your ships and ready your weapons. The hunt begins tonight. On Earth, President Amara Osei addressed all of humanity from the steps of the Global Unity Building in Geneva. Behind her stood the flags of every nation that had joined together 300 years ago. And before her stood billions of viewers watching through screens across 17 worlds. My fellow humans, she began with fire in her eyes. Our children have been stolen by those who believe they can break our spirit through cruelty. They have studied our history and seen our wars and our divisions, and they think these make us weak. She paused and let her gaze sweep across the countless watching faces. They are about to learn the truth about humanity. When we are divided, we fight among ourselves, but when we are united, there is no force in this universe that can stand against us. Her words ignited something ancient and powerful across human space. In shipyards on Mars, workers abandoned their civilian projects and began constructing warships around the clock. In factories on Luna, assembly lines switched from consumer goods to weapons of devastating power. Veterans who had served decades ago contacted their old units and demanded to be reinstated. Teenagers lied about their ages to join the military. Scientists abandoned their research to design new weapons and new defenses. The Valdrics had expected panic and surrender, but instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. Admiral Helena Chun took command of the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Standing on the bridge of her flagship, the U.S. retribution with cold fury etched into every line of her face. Her granddaughter was among those stolen children, and she would tear the galaxy apart to bring her home. How many ships do we have? She asked her tactical officer. 4,000 warships ready for deployment, Admiral, with another 2,000 completing final preparations. Civilian vessels are also volunteering. We have over 500 converted freighters armed with military-grade weapons. Helena nodded slowly, calculating the odds in her mind. The Valdrics Consortium commanded roughly 8,000 warships across their 6 star systems, but numbers did not always determine the outcome of war. The Valdrics are old, she said quietly to her senior officers, and old species become cautious and comfortable and afraid of risk. They fight to preserve what they have, while we will fight for something far more precious. Across human space, the message spread from world to world like wildfire. We are coming for our children, and nothing will stop us. Kethver received intelligence reports about humanity's mobilization and dismissed them with a contemptuous wave of his clawed hand. He had seen younger species rage against their betters before, and they always broke against the reality of Valdric's power. Let them come, he announced to his admirals as they gathered in his throne room. Their fury will burn bright and then fade, as it always does with such emotional creatures. They will realize they cannot win, and they will accept our terms. His admirals exchanged uncertain glances, for the reports from their spies were troubling. Human industrial output had increased by 300% in just 2 weeks, and their military recruitment had exceeded all projections. My lord, one brave admiral ventured, perhaps we should consider returning the children as a gesture of goodwill. The humans seem more unified than we anticipated. Kethver silenced him with a look that could freeze a star. The children are our leverage, he snarled, and we will not surrender leverage because of human tantrums. Hold your positions and wait for them to see reason. But reason was the last thing on humanity's mind. In the darkness of space, Sasha Volkov and her wolves departed Fenris Station in ships that moved like ghosts through the void. Their mission was simple: infiltrate Valdrix space, locate the children, and eliminate anything that stood between them and their objective. Admiral Helena Chen opened a communication channel that broadcast across every frequency the Valdrix could receive, and her face appeared on screens throughout their 6 star systems. "I am Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Navy," she announced in a voice that carried all the weight of human determination. "And I have a message for Ambassador Kethfer and his Valdrix consortium." She leaned forward, and her eyes burned with an intensity that made even hardened Valdrix warriors feel a chill run down their spines. "You have our children. We do not negotiate for our children, and we do not forgive those who harm them. We are coming for them, and we are coming for you." She paused to let her words sink in across enemy space. "I suggest you pray to whatever gods your species worships, because humanity is about to teach you why the universe should never threaten what we love. See you soon." The transmission ended, and silence fell across Valdrix space as millions of alien beings realized that something terrible was approaching. In her containment cell, Maya Chan felt a strange warmth spread through her heart. She did not know why, but somehow she knew that help was coming. She looked up at the stars through the tiny window of her prison ship and whispered into the darkness, "I knew you would come, grandmother. I knew you would never leave us behind." And somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars, 4,000 human warships burned toward Valdrix space with vengeance in their hearts and fire in their souls. They touched Earth's children. The universe paid the price. The wolves struck first, moving through Valdrix space like shadows made of death and vengeance. Commander Sasha Volkov led her team through the darkness with cold precision, eliminating targets that the enemy never even saw coming. Early warning stations exploded in silence as antimatter charges tore through their hulls. Communication relays went dark one after another in a wave that spread across 6 star systems. Patrol ships vanished without sending distress signals. The Valdrix High Command woke to discover they were blind and deaf, cut off from their fleets and their defenses by ghosts they could not detect. "What is happening?" Kethfer demanded as frantic reports flooded his throne room. "How are they destroying our systems without being seen?" His admirals had no answers, only fear in their eyes as more and more red icons appeared on their tactical displays. While the wolves created chaos behind enemy lines, Admiral Helena Chen led the main fleet through hyperspace toward the Nexus Gate, the central junction of Valdrix space where all their major shipping lanes converged. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer announced as the fleet prepared to drop out of faster-than-light travel. The enemy forces detected at the Nexus Gate, approximately 8,000 warships in defensive formation. Helena smiled grimly at the numbers. The Valdrix had gathered nearly their entire military strength in one place, confident that their superior numbers would crush the human attack. "They think this will be a battle of ships against ships," she told her officers, "but they are wrong. This is a battle of wills, and ours is stronger." The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like an avalanche of steel and fury, 5,000 warships spreading into attack formation with weapons already charging. The Valdrix commander broadcast a warning to the approaching humans, ordering them to surrender or be destroyed. Admiral Chun did not bother to respond. "All ships," she commanded over the fleet-wide channel, "weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten our children." The Battle of Nexus Gate erupted with violence that would be remembered for 1,000 years. Human ships plunged into the Valdrix formation with reckless aggression that stunned the Elder race. Where the Valdrix fought cautiously, preserving their vessels and avoiding unnecessary risk, humans fought like beings who had nothing to lose. Captain Marcus Webb of the destroyer UES Furious found his ship surrounded by 3 Valdrix cruisers. His engines were damaged and his shields were failing, but he did not consider surrender for even a moment. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered his crew. and tell my daughter I love her." As escape pods launched from his dying vessel, Webb aimed his ship directly at the largest enemy cruiser and pushed his damaged engines to maximum power. The collision tore both ships apart in a blinding explosion that took a second cruiser with it. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human captains chose death over defeat. They rammed their ships into enemy vessels. They flew fighters into reactor cores. They overloaded their own power plants to take enemies with them. The Valdrix had never faced opponents who valued victory more than survival, and their formation began to crumble under the weight of human sacrifice. "They are insane." The Valdrix fleet commander screamed as another of his battleships vanished in nuclear fire. "No species fights like this. No species throws away their lives so freely." But he was wrong, because humans had always been willing to die for what they loved. It was written in their history and carved into their souls, and the Valdrix had foolishly awakened this ancient truth. Admiral Chun directed the battle from her flagship with cold efficiency, sending squadrons to exploit weaknesses and reinforcements to struggling positions. She had studied every war in human history, and she applied those bloody lessons with devastating effect. The tide turned after 6 hours of continuous combat when the Valdrix flagship exploded under concentrated fire from a dozen human destroyers. With their command structure shattered, the enemy fleet began to retreat in disorder. "Do not let them escape," Helena commanded. "Pursue and destroy. Leave no ship capable of threatening our worlds." The battle lasted 16 hours in total, and when the guns finally fell silent, the results spoke for themselves. The Valdrix had lost 6,400 ships destroyed and another 1,000 captured, while humanity had lost 1,200 vessels, with the survivors already demanding to return to combat. But the battle was only part of the mission, and while the main fleet crushed the Valdrix military, the Wolves completed their true objective. Sasha Volkov had tracked the children to Kethver's personal fortress moon, a heavily defended installation that the ambassador believed was impenetrable. He was about to learn how wrong that belief was. The Wolves descended on the fortress in perfect silence, their stealth ships landing in shadows, while their enhanced soldiers moved through corridors like vengeful spirits. Guards died without ever seeing what killed them, their bodies crumpling silently to the floor. Sasha found the detention level where 4,000 children huddled in containment cells, guarded by 100 Valdrix soldiers who believed themselves safe in the heart of their territory. "Wolves," she whispered into her comm unit. "Weapons free." The battle lasted 11 minutes. 100 Valdrix guards fell to 200 human warriors who moved with superhuman speed and struck with inhuman precision. Not a single child was harmed in the fighting. Sasha personally deactivated the containment field, holding Maya Shun, and the little girl looked up at the armored warrior with wide, wondering eyes. "Are you an angel?" Maya asked in a trembling voice. Sasha knelt down and removed her helmet, revealing a face that was hard but not unkind. "No, little one," she said softly. "I am a wolf, and I have come to take you home to your grandmother." Maya threw her arms around the warrior's neck and sobbed with relief as other wolves moved through the detention level, freeing children and carrying those too weak to walk. As they loaded the children onto extraction ships, Maya looked back at the burning fortress and asked the question that burned in every young heart. "Are the monsters gone now?" Sasha followed her gaze to the flames and the destruction, and her eyes grew cold with unfinished purpose. "Not yet, little one," she answered with quiet menace. "But they will be, I promise you, they will be." The wolves lifted off from the fortress moon with 4,000 rescued children aboard their ships, leaving behind only fire and death and the broken bodies of those who had dared to threaten humanity's most precious treasure. When Admiral Chun received confirmation that all children were safe and heading home, she finally allowed herself to weep. Her granddaughter was alive, and the monsters who had taken her would pay for their crimes. Set course for the Valdric's homeworld, she ordered through her tears. We are not finished, yet not until every last one of them answers for what they have done. The fleet turned toward enemy space, and the universe trembled at what was coming. They touched Earth's children. The universe paid the price. The children came home to a galaxy that wept with joy and burned with rage. Transport ships carrying 4,000 young survivors docked at stations across human space, and families rushed to embrace sons and daughters they had feared, lost forever. Admiral Helena Chun stood at the docking bay of Earth's primary orbital station as the shuttle carrying her granddaughter descended through the atmospheric shield. Her heart pounded against her ribs as the doors opened and small figures began to emerge. Maya saw her grandmother and ran with arms outstretched, screaming a name that echoed through the cavernous bay. Grandmother! Grandmother! Helena dropped to her knees and caught the little girl in an embrace that spoke of terror and relief and love beyond measure. Tears streamed down the old admiral's face as she held her granddaughter and promised, silently, that nothing would ever hurt her again. But even as families celebrated their reunions, darker truths began to emerge from the rescued children. Medical examinations revealed that the Valdrics had not simply imprisoned their captives. They had studied them with cold scientific curiosity. Blood samples had been taken, tissue had been harvested, and experiments had been conducted to understand why humans were so resilient and so determined. Several children bore scars from these procedures, marks that would remind them of their ordeal for the rest of their lives. And 3 children, 3 precious young souls, had not survived the testing at all. When President Asay received a full medical report, she sat alone in her office for an hour before she trusted herself to speak. The rage that burned in her heart threatened to consume everything she had worked to build. In the fleet, Admiral Chun had to personally restrain several of her captains who demanded immediate permission to glass every Valdric's world from orbit. These were warriors who had seen the worst of war, and even they were shaken by what had been done to innocent children. I understand your fury, Helena told them with barely controlled emotion, because I share it. My own granddaughter bears scars from their experiments. But we will not become monsters to punish monsters. She looked at each of her captains with eyes that burned with determination. We will have justice, she promised them. Real justice that the galaxy will remember forever. But we will not commit genocide, because that is not who we are. President Asay addressed the galaxy from a podium surrounded by images of the children, their scars, their trauma, their 3 small graves. Her voice never wavered even as tears ran down her face. We offered the Valdric's peace, she declared to watching billions across 1,000 worlds. We offered them trade and friendship and cooperation. They responded by stealing our children and treating them like laboratory animals. She paused to let the images speak for themselves. 3 of our children died in their custody. 3 young lives cut short by cruelty and arrogance. We will never forget their names, and the universe will never forget what was done to them. Our expression hardened with resolve that could move mountains. The Valdric's consortium believed they could break humanity by threatening what we love most. Instead, they have shown the galaxy what we become when our children are harmed. Now they will learn the price of their cruelty. The human fleet descended on Valdric's space, not as destroyers, but as judges. They did not bomb cities or murder civilians because humanity refused to become the evil they fought against. Instead, they systematically dismantled every piece of Valdric's military power. Shipyards were destroyed, weapons factories were reduced to rubble, and military installations were eliminated with surgical precision. Kepher watched from his throne world as his empire crumbled around him. The military might that had made the Valdrics feared across the galaxy vanished in a matter of weeks, and he could do nothing to stop it. We should surrender, his remaining advisors urged him. Negotiate terms before they destroy everything. But Kepher was too proud, and too foolish to accept defeat. He barricaded himself in his palace and declared that he would never bow to inferior creatures. Commander Volkov and her wolves found him hiding in his private chambers 3 days later, surrounded by guards who died as quickly as all the others. The ambassador, who had ordered the kidnapping of 4,000 children, stood alone and trembling before the woman who had rescued them. "You cannot do this," Kethver hissed as Sasha bound his clawed hands. "I am an ambassador. I have diplomatic immunity." Sasha looked at him with contempt that could freeze a star. "You lost any protection when you touched our children," she informed him coldly. "Now you will face judgment for your crimes." A galactic tribunal was convened, with representatives from 100 species gathering to witness justice served. The evidence against Kethver and his co-conspirators was overwhelming, and their guilt was never in doubt. The Valdrix leaders were not executed. Humanity refused to give them the mercy of quick death. Instead, they were sentenced to imprisonment on isolated worlds, where they would spend the rest of their long lives alone with their failures. Kethver was sent to a dead moon at the edge of known space, where he would live out his remaining centuries in solitary contemplation of his crimes. The ambassador, who had believed himself master of lesser creatures, would die forgotten and alone. The Valdrix Consortium ceased to exist as a political entity. Their worlds remained inhabited. Their people were not harmed, but they would never again possess the power to threaten anyone. Other elder races watched these events with growing terror. They had dismissed humans as young and weak and divided, and they had been catastrophically wrong. The Arcturus hegemony, the mightiest of the remaining elder powers, sent a delegation to Earth with unprecedented speed. Their ambassador was an ancient being who had lived for 2,000 years and had never knelt before anyone. He knelt before President Asay and the Unified Council with humility that shocked diplomats across the galaxy. "We come not with demands or conditions," he announced in a voice heavy with newfound respect. "We come to seek friendship with humanity, true friendship between equals." Asay studied him for a long moment before responding. "The Valdrix sought to rule through fear and cruelty," she said quietly, "and look what it brought them. We had no interest in empire or domination. We only wish to live in peace and protect those we love." The Arcturan ambassador bowed his ancient head. "Then let there be peace between our peoples," he offered, "and let the galaxy learn from the Valdrix mistake. Humanity has proven that love defended with strength is the most powerful force in the universe." In hospitals across human space, traumatized children began the long process of healing. Therapists worked with gentle patience. Families provided endless love, and slowly the scars, both visible and invisible, began to fade. But humanity would never forget what had been done, and the galaxy would never forget what humanity had done in response. 3 small graves on Elysium 4 became a place of pilgrimage, where visitors from 100 worlds came to pay respects and remember the price of cruelty. The universe had learned a lesson it would never forget. Touch Earth's children and face consequences beyond imagination. They touched Earth's children. The universe paid the price. 20 years had passed since the Valdrix War, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity had not sought empire or dominion, but they had earned something far more valuable: respect forged in fire and tempered by mercy. Maya Shun stood at the observation window of the rebuilt Aldrin Academy, but she was no longer the frightened little girl who had been stolen from this very place. She was 28 years old now, a commander in the United Earth Navy, and she carried herself with quiet strength that inspired everyone around her. The scars on her arms had faded to thin silver lines, but she wore them without shame. They reminded her of darkness survived and light reclaimed, and they drove her to protect others from similar fates. "Commander Chun," a young ensign called from behind her, "Admiral Vance is asking for you in the main hall." Maya smiled at the mention of her mentor. Helena Vance, formerly Admiral Helena Chun, But she had taken a new name when she retired from active duty, now served as headmaster of the academy she had helped save. The old warrior had traded her warship for a classroom, and she taught young minds the lessons that mattered most: strategy and tactics, yes, but also compassion and restraint, and the difference between strength and cruelty. Maya found her grandmother standing before a crowd of students in the academy's grand hall, pointing at a holographic display of the Battle of Nexus Gate. The Valdrics outnumbered us significantly, Helena was explaining to her rapt audience, and by all conventional military wisdom, we should have lost. Can anyone tell me why we won? A young student raised her hand. She was not human but Arcturan, one of hundreds of alien children now attending the academy alongside humanity's own. Because you fought for something they could not understand, the Arcturan girl answered. You fought for your children, and that made you stronger than numbers or weapons. Helena smiled at her student with pride. Exactly right. Strength without love is just violence, and violence alone cannot win wars that matter. But love defended with strength that is unstoppable. Maya waited until the lesson ended before approaching her grandmother. The two women embraced with warmth that had only grown deeper over the years. You wanted to see me? Maya asked. Helena nodded and led her granddaughter to a private balcony overlooking the academy grounds. The memorial dedication is tomorrow, she said quietly, and I wanted you to be ready. It will bring back memories. Maya looked out at the campus where she had once been a prisoner and was now a protector. I remember everything, she admitted, but the memories do not control me anymore. They remind me why I serve and why I fight. They give me purpose. Helena squeezed her hand with grandmother's love. I am so proud of who you have become, she said softly. The next day, representatives from 100 worlds gathered on Elysium 4 for the dedication of the Children's Memorial, a towering monument at the center of the rebuilt capital city. President Asay, now elderly but still commanding, spoke words that echoed across the galaxy. We gather here to remember 3 young lives lost to cruelty and arrogance, she declared, but also to celebrate 4,000 lives saved by courage and love. This memorial stands as witness to both tragedy and triumph. She gestured to the monument, where 3 names were inscribed in letters of gold. Sarah Wells, age 7. Thomas Nakamura, age 9. Zara Ahmed, age 6. They were small, they were precious, and the universe learned the price of forgetting this. Maya stood among the crowd with tears streaming down her face. She had known Sarah, had played with her in the academy gardens before the darkness came. The little girl's laughter still echoed in her memories. We built this memorial not for revenge, President Osei continued, but for remembrance. Let every species who looks upon it understand that children are sacred, that innocence must be protected, and that those who threaten the young will face consequences they cannot imagine. The Elysium Doctrine had become galactic law in the years since the war. Crimes against children of any species would be met with unified response from all civilized worlds. Humanity had not just defended their own. They had extended their protection to every young life in the galaxy. Somewhere in the crowd, a small alien child tugged at her father's hand. Father, she asked in her species' musical language, why do the humans care so much about children? The father, a historian who had studied humanity for decades, knelt down to meet his daughter's eyes. Because long ago, someone hurt their children, he explained gently, and the humans taught the universe that some crimes can never be forgiven. They showed us that love has claws, and that those claws will rip apart anyone who threatens the innocent. The child looked up at the memorial, and then at the human soldiers standing guard around the ceremony. Are they dangerous? She whispered. Her father smiled and shook his head. Not to you, little one, never to you. The humans are protectors now, and they watch over all the children of the galaxy. As long as they stand guard, nothing will ever hurt you. In the shadows at the edge of the ceremony, a figure watched with eyes that had seen too much. Commander Sasha Volkov had never officially retired, and the wolves still prowled the darkness between stars. She received reports of threats and eliminated them before they could grow. Slavers who targeted children vanished without trace. Traffickers who dealt in young lives were found dead in their ships, and anyone who contemplated harming innocents soon learned that shadows had teeth. Sasha would never attend ceremonies or accept medals. She preferred the darkness where she could do the most good. But she allowed herself a small smile as she watched Maya-chan stand tall among the crowd. The little girl she had carried from a burning fortress had become a warrior in her own right, and the universe was better for it. At the edge of known space, on a dead moon that orbited a dying star, an ancient prisoner sat alone in his cell and stared at nothing. Kethver had lived for 640 years now, and every day of the last 20 had been spent in solitary contemplation. He received one visitor per year, Maya-chan, who came not to gloat, but to show him photographs of the children he had failed to break. She never spoke, simply displayed the images of thriving young lives, and then departed. It was, she had once explained to her grandmother, the cruelest punishment she could imagine, forcing him to see that his cruelty had accomplished nothing. As the sun set on Elysium 4 and the memorial dedication concluded, Maya walked through the academy grounds with her grandmother one last time before departing for her next assignment. "The galaxy is at peace," Helena observed, "and humanity is respected. I never imagined I would see such a day." Maya nodded, but her eyes held shadows of hard-won wisdom. "Peace is never permanent," she replied, "and respect must be continuously earned. But we have shown the universe what we become when threatened, and I believe that lesson will endure." She looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Besides," she added with a small smile, "the wolves are still watching. Anyone who considers harming children will find themselves facing nightmares they cannot escape." Helena laughed and wrapped an arm around her granddaughter. "Then let us enjoy the peace while it lasts," she suggested, "and trust that humanity will always rise to protect the innocent." Across the galaxy, in countless homes on countless worlds, children of 100 species slept safely in their beds. Their parents no longer feared the darkness, because they knew that somewhere out there, human guardians watched over all the young. The universe had learned a simple truth that would echo through eternity. Earth's children were sacred, and so were all children everywhere. Touch them at your peril, for humanity would never forgive and never forget. And in the vast silence between stars, the wolves continued their endless patrol. Guardians of innocence, shadows with teeth, forever watching, forever protecting. The universe had paid the price for one moment of cruelty, and in doing so had gained protectors who would stand guard for all time. This was humanity's gift to the cosmos, not conquest, not domination, but the simple promise that no child would ever stand alone against the darkness. And that promise would never be broken. 50 years had passed since the Kithrani fleet first appeared in Earth's sky, and the galactic concord that had ruled 1,000 star systems for 10,000 years no longer existed. In its place stood the Terran Alliance, a coalition of over 100 species united not by conquest, but by choice. And on this day they had gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall on New Geneva to celebrate the anniversary of their liberation. The hall was vast and beautiful, built from materials donated by every member species as a symbol of their unity, and its walls displayed the flags and emblems of worlds that had once been slaves and were now equals. Ambassador Valith of the Kethrani walked slowly to the central platform, her scales dulled with age and her movements careful and deliberate, for she was ancient now by any species standards and had lived long enough to see everything she once believed proven wrong. She had been invited to speak as a witness to history, to tell the story of how the galaxy had changed. And though she had refused this invitation 3 times before she had finally accepted, knowing this would be her last chance to say what needed to be said, the assembly fell silent as she took her place at the podium. And she looked out at the gathered representatives, seeing species that had been broken and rebuilt, cultures that had been erased and recovered, and everywhere the influence of the humans who had made it all possible. She found the human delegation easily, for they sat in simple uniforms without ornament or decoration, needing no display of power to prove their strength. And she nodded to them in acknowledgement before she began to speak. 50 years ago, I stood before the Council of 12 and delivered my assessment of the species known as humanity, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I called them Class 7, pre-enlightened, primitive. A murmur passed through the assembly, for everyone knew this story, but hearing it from her own mouth gave it a weight that recordings could never capture. I told the council that humanity posed no threat to the Concord, that their short lives made them insignificant, that their internal conflicts made them weak, and that their emotional nature made them inferior to civilized species like ourselves. She paused, letting the silence stretch before continuing. I was wrong, and my wrongness cost my people their empire and their pride. And I've spent 50 years trying to understand how I could have been so completely mistaken. The human delegation remained motionless, their expressions unreadable, and Valeth marveled at how much they had changed and how much they had remained the same. The humans taught me that short lives do not make a species insignificant, she continued. Instead, their short lives taught them to value every moment, to learn quickly, to act decisively, and to never waste time on hesitation or doubt. She gestured toward the assembly around her, at the representatives of species that had been enslaved for centuries and were now free. They taught me that conflict does not make a species weak, for their constant struggles against each other had forced them to develop every form of warfare imaginable. And when they finally united against a common enemy, they brought 10,000 years of military knowledge to bear against us. Her voice grew softer as she reached the heart of what she had come to say. And they taught me that emotion is not a weakness to be evolved past, but a strength to be embraced, for it was their emotions that drove them to achieve the impossible. She turned to face the human delegation directly, and for a moment, the ancient Kethrani ambassador and the human representatives simply looked at each other across the distance of species and history. They call it many things, Valeth said. Rage when their homes were threatened, spite when they were told to surrender, defiance when they were told they could not win. But I have learned its true name after 50 years of watching what they have built. The chamber was utterly silent now, every being present waiting for her words. They call it hope, she said. The primitive belief that no matter how dark things become, they can always fight for something better. We Concord species evolved past this emotion millennia ago. We considered it a weakness, a delusion that prevented acceptance of reality. She shook her head slowly, acknowledging the foolishness of her former beliefs. But the humans never accepted reality. They changed it instead, and when we told them they could not defeat us, they simply refused to believe us. And when we told them they could not build faster-than-light drives, they refused to believe us. And when we told them they could not free our slaves, they refused to believe us. She spread her arms to encompass the entire assembly, the 100 species that had chosen to stand with humanity. And now we are all here, free, because one primitive species was too stubborn to accept the reality we tried to force upon them. The human delegation rose to their feet, and with them rose every other species in the assembly, not in worship, because the humans would never accept such a thing, but in respect and solidarity and gratitude. Outside the assembly hall, in gardens that had been designed to accommodate species from 100 different worlds, children of a dozen races played together in the warm sunlight, laughing in ways that needed no translation They were the first generation born into the Terran Alliance, and they knew nothing of the Concord's cruelty or humanity's wrath. For their parents had decided that the old hatreds would die with the old generations. They knew only that they were free, and that freedom was worth protecting and somewhere in the stars, in ships that patrolled the borders of Alliance space. Humanity kept watch over the peace they had bled to create, ready to fight again if any power dared threaten what they had built. Some species ruled through fear, dominating their neighbors with threats of destructions. Some ruled through technology, using their advanced science to make themselves indispensable. Some ruled through age and wisdom, guiding younger races with the knowledge of millennia. Humanity had chosen a different path. They ruled through choice, the choice that had been denied to them, which they would never deny to another. Every species in the Alliance was free to leave if they wished, free to make their own decisions and their own mistakes, free to be whatever they wanted to be. Most chose to stay, not because they feared humanity, but because they trusted them. And in a galaxy that had known nothing but fear and domination for 10,000 years, trust was the rarest and most precious resource of all. The anniversary celebrations continued long into the night, with music and dancing and feasting that brought together species that had never known each other existed before the humans had freed them. And when the celebrations finally ended and the delegates returned to their worlds, they carried with them memories of a species that had been called primitive and had proven to be anything but the old Concord had believed that power came from conquest, from taking what belonged to others and making it your own. The humans had taught the galaxy a different lesson. True power came from lifting others up, from giving them the strength to stand on their own, from building something greater than any one species could build alone. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all. On the great monument that stood in the center of New Geneva, built from stones taken from every world in the Alliance, there was an inscription carved in 100 languages. It read simply, "They called us primitive, and we showed them what primitives can do." And beneath it, added by human hands on the 50th anniversary, were words that captured everything humanity had learned and everything they had become. We were made by our struggles. We were defined by our choices, and we will be remembered by what we built together. The stars looked down on a galaxy transformed, and somewhere in the great darkness between worlds, the light of human ships burned like beacons of hope, guiding the way toward a future that no one could have imagined 50 years before. The years before the Telefin, primitives had inherited the stars, and they had proven worthy of them.